Hey, yo, welcome to another episode of Buy or Bust. Today we're going to be talking about the brand new Series 5 card coming out on Tuesday, Joaquin Torres. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so we have Joaquin Torres, which is the brand new Series 5 card that has the ability ongoing. The unreveal abilities of your one-cost cards here happen twice. So it's kind of like a mini Wong on your own, just singular lane like Wong itself, but only for your one-cost cards. But let's go ahead and jump into some key synergies with this card before we continue to break this card down even further. So starting off first and foremost, we do have the hood. I put the hood as one of the key focal points with this card because who doesn't like having two demons in your hand after a single turn, opposed to just one demon itself. I also have Yondu. I think this card can work well with Mill. Of course, Mill doesn't have a lot of one-cost cards you're maybe using, but I don't think you have to have a lot of one-cost cards in order to get the most out of Joaquin. Of course, there are going to be certain decks that are better having more one-cost cards to get that value, but I think when you also have Misery in this list, it allows you to make your Hood and your Yondu potentially go off more times as well. So let's say in a perfect curve kind of situation, you have your Joaquin down, you play your Hood, that's a demon, two demons in your hand. You play Yondu maybe that same exact turn, you destroy two cards, and then you play Misery. That's going to give you two additional demons back into your hand, as well as Yondu to go off again. So that's Yondu destroying four cards, and that is four demons in your hand. Of course, you do have to manage your hand space in that sense as well, but you're also mitigating that -3 power off the board with Misery, and you're also completely destroying your opponent's deck. This is where my head went first originally. It was some Mill. I think it's also going to work with some Darkhawk and some Bounce as well. We have those three lists I will break down here in a little bit. But of course, there are some key counters to this as well. Starting off, of course, we do have Red Guardian. Yes, Joaquin is a 3/4. So he is going to have, a larger stat line than more cards themselves. But if you have Joaquin on a lane by himself, that is making him a more easy Red Guardian target, especially if you don't have priority. Even though he does have that 4 power, Red Guardian kind of still eats this up. This card is still relevant in the meta. It's also an ongoing card, so Rogue can steal this ability from Joaquin as well. And then Enchantress also does mitigate ongoing cards. So just keeping that in mind there. Cosmo is another card that could be used to counter this too, because it only works with on-reveal abilities like Wong. You could put Cosmo on the Joaquin lane, and then your opponent really could not get any value, or you get Cosmo'd and then you don't get any value at the same time. But with that in mind, let's also talk about the good for this card. So starting off first and foremost, it is a cheaper Wong. Yes, it is only 4 1-drops, but is a 3 cost instead of a 4 cost like Wong. And it has 4 power instead of 2 power like Wong. But like I said, it is just for a 1-drop, so it's maybe more niche in that sense. But you can get it out earlier on curve instead of having to Zabu or Psylocke like you do for Wong. Also, you have to keep in mind it's another disrupt enabler, whether it is Mill, whether it is Darkhawk, maybe even some Affliction if you're using like a Silver Sable, or you're maybe using a Spider-Ham or an Iceman. You can really get those 1-cost on reveals to go off multiple times, goes off twice. So like the 2 demons I was talking about, 2 Yondus, 2 Korgs in the same sense, 2 Icemans. You could do Spider-Ham twice if you want to do Spider-Ham twice. Just thinking about it that way, Celine could go off twice too, Silver Sable, a couple different 1-drops at the very minimum that you can actually get some immense value from. And then, of course, it is hard to disrupt this without blocking the ongoingness, whether it's a Rogue or Red Guardian, an Enchantress, or a Cosmo. Those are 4 cards right there, but you have to play into that lane. And if you get your opponent to Red Guardian, your Joaquin Torres, when you have other cards that might be even better for them to have Red Guardian instead, it's kind of a win. It's making them have to use that card earlier than maybe they were hoping for. So I really like that opportunity there. And then, of course, your cards can be bounced off of Joaquin and played again because they're 1-drops. Falcon can put them back. You can have Beast to bounce them back. Of course, you have to play Joaquin again after the Beast. But you can have these proc multiple times. It's not a single-use proc. Moving on to the bad, though, it is limited to 1-cost cards, like I said. So you only gets the on reveal to go off twice on 1-cost cards, which isn't maybe the best. Maybe you're not wanting to run a lot of 1-cost cards anyways. But I do want to also mention, you could play Grandmaster into Joaquin. You could Grandmaster your 1-cost cards into Joaquin, and then your card will go off 3 times in 1 turn. That seems pretty cool. Of course, it is predictable. It's a single lane, so your opponent knows you're going to be playing cards into that Joaquin lane to be able to get that value the same way they would think with a Wong, the same way they would think with a Shuri. So your opponent at least knows what that's going to happen. And it's a pretty bad late draw if you don't have 1-drops. It's just a 3-4. You're not able to really get that power. And more often than not, you're probably trying to set this up early to be able to get the interaction. Kind of like Wong, you're trying to set that up as early as possible to kind of just get maybe the enormous amount of power across the board you're trying to. But moving on over to the floor and the ceiling for this card. At its peak, you play this out on curve, and you have a bunch of 1-cost cards that can either be bounced, can be Misery'd, or even Grandmastered. You're going to have that 3-4 stat line from Joaquin Torres himself, plus those on reveals of the 1-cost going off twice. If you bounce it, there's potential for those abilities to have gone off 4 times because, you know, you play it the first time, it goes off twice. You bounce it, you play it on Joaquin again, it goes off twice again. That's 4 times the 1-cost could go off. And it's not limited to just one 1-cost going off. You can play multiple cards into this lane and then bounce them back and get the value there, which should be really nice. Of course, on the low end, it's a late draw. You don't have any 1-cost. It's just a 3-4. But I think on average, when it comes to Joaquin, you're probably going to have at least 1 or 2 1-cost cards you're going to be able to play onto Joaquin. If you play just one, that's a 1-cost card that goes off twice. If you play 2, you got the on-reveal of 1-cost cards going off 2 times, like 2 different times each. So that's like 4 on-reveal abilities happening because it's 1-cost twice, whatever, multiplication, you know, it works. So I think that's going to be like kind of like the middle grounds there. Of course, there's definitely going to be games where you have 3 or 4 different 1-costs go off on Joaquin, depending on if you're able to bounce it, or even with Misery, you can get those 1-costs to go off a total of 4 times because Misery makes the on-reveal happen again. And since it's on Joaquin, it makes it go off again, so it goes off a total of 4 times. So I think this card has value there. I think it is still a bit niche, but I have 3 decks right here. The first deck we have is going to be Mill on repeat. It's very similar to the typical Mill package you're seeing right now. You're just not running Ares in here. I think Ares is a bit of cope. I played Ares Mill, and I was having fun with it, but I wasn't really stealing a lot of cubes or winning a lot of games. The thing with Mill is like you really need to snap into your turns when you have the right curve because people are just going to retreat when you thin out their entire deck. And if my Yondu... If Yondu goes off 4 times and I don't get my last 4 draws, I'm going to retreat. So I need to snap into going into a Yondu, into a Misery. The Hood going off 2 times. You know, you have to kind of like snap into those conditions in order to maximize cubes here. And Joaquin, like I said, there's only 2 1-drops in this list, but there are only 2 1-drops you need to be able to get the value out of Joaquin in this list here. The next list we have is Flying Hawks. What's really cool is Zabu is on reveal. So Zabu on Joaquin would go off twice. So your 4-cost cards would be discounted twice. So they go to 2 costs. So it's kind of like old school Zabu. In that sense, your Korg on Joaquin as well makes it go 2 rocks into your deck, your opponent's deck. You Misery onto the Korg as well. That is 4 rocks that have been put into your opponent's deck. You have your own Subterranea there. You also have Kate Bishop in this list, where you have either the Grapple, you have the Pim Arrow, you have, you know, the, what you call it? You have the Acid Arrow, and then you have the Basic Arrow. Basic Arrow on Joaquin would make you be able to get that on reveal to go off twice. So you can get that +3, turns into a +6, so that arrow's a 1-7. Sounds pretty good to me. But you still like have the core, you get the Hood value, you have Miss Marvel because you have other cards you can put on these other lanes since you're having potentially a lot of demons. You have the arrows as well. And of course you have Grandmaster. You can Grandmaster your 1-drop to make it go off in the middle 1 time, and then it goes off again on Joaquin. I believe it may even go off twice there. I think you'll have to test it more, but I'm thinking of the Grandmaster value. It's kind of like with Wong. It at least will go off twice that turn instead of just 1 time, which I think is really solid. And then lastly, we did make a Falcon Slam / bounce list over here. It's kind of more of the old school bounce. I feel like you could totally update it to whatever you're seeing more of in the meta. But we have Black Swan to be able to get some of this extra value too. To be able to play all the demons out, be able to play all the 1-drops out, be able to do Sage, hit monkey things. Like, I feel like there's a couple different ways you could play this. I don't think this is a set-in-stone bounce or slam list by any means. Just maybe just a rough draft or something you guys could even update yourself to get better value out of. This is just kind of where my head went immediately, especially just getting like crazy value for Joaquin here because you have so many different 1-drops and you have the hit monkey and you have the Black Swan to be able to make it go over and over and over again. So I think this all totally could work really well there. But moving on over to the Spotlight Week. This is where it gets a little interesting, okay? So we have Joaquin, we have Makari, and we have Nomura, okay? So I don't really see the synergy necessarily with Nomura and with Makari with Joaquin. I feel like it's just we put cards in a spotlight this week, which is really, really interesting. And they're all Series 5 cards. So if you're missing these cards, it's a good week to open for Series 5 cards just in that sense. But like holistically speaking, I'm not a huge fan necessarily of Makari at the moment. Yes, it does alleviate some hand space for you. So it just runs out on the board to a random location. Nomura did recently just get buffed in the OTA as well to be a 5/7 from a 5/6. There are some sneaky Nomura decks at the moment, which goes more into like the Wong kind of shenanigans that we were talking about. And Joaquin's like a mini Wong, but only for 1-drop. So it's really just interesting there. Unless, I don't know, you're trying to do like America Chavez stuff. I don't even know. But I like Nomura. You know, I'm a huge Scarlet Spider guy. I like the, you know, those kind of decks to where you can just activate, you know, there's the Lasher shenanigans you can do with Nomura and stuff too. So if you're missing Nomura, I think it's a good week to open for Nomura. I think she's more of a must-have in my opinion than Makari, even though like I don't think she's like a must-have kind of thing. So I can't say like I think you guys 100% should open this week because it's, you know, 3 amazing cards. But if you're missing these cards, it's not that bad to open this week just to try and stay more collection complete. But overall, I think it's maybe one of the weaker weeks we actually have this season, especially when we're looking at March's season. March's season actually looks just incredible overall. The way the spotlights, the way the cards are, like it just looks like a way better season in that sense. So I may just not open spotlights this week. It really just depends. I'd wait a couple days for sure. But going on to just Joaquin himself, this is what I've seen like community talk about Joaquin. They're not super high on this card. Yes, it has, you know, the opportunities to kind of pop off in like some very good circumstances. I feel like it's not as flexible, and like I think the community is thinking the same thing. It's not the most flexible card. It's kind of niche in what it does since it is 1 cost. Don't really think it'll be adjusted. I kind of agree in that sense too. Like, there's not like a whole lot of likelihood unless they maybe make him a 3/5. I don't think they expand him past 1 cost. So like I'm kind of in the same sense. Like I think he is more niche. I think for what he does, he could be okay. Like I don't think it's the strongest card ever when we're looking at some of these other cards. Like I'm definitely way higher on Sam Wilson, Captain America than I am Joaquin. Especially if it would be different if the shield was an honor reveal. Kind of with Joaquin and kind of pair together in that sense. So it's really interesting, and I wish Red Wing was the same. If Red Wing was still a 1/2, it would be even better with Joaquin here, but it's kind of just weird now in a sense. So I'm not like super high on this card, like overall, like when it comes to like the flexibility, the play rate, I think. But I do think like it's a really wavering buy here, okay? I don't think necessarily this card is a must-have or like the best card ever, but I do think what it does have some really huge potential that maybe I'm not seeing right now. I don't think it is necessarily a bust from like what I'm looking at and from like some of the decks and what I've seen too. Just being able to get the 1 cost to be able to go off twice is a really good opportunity. It doesn't have to be 2 1-cost cards. It could be 1 1-cost card to be able to get that value. Let's say it is a Yondu that destroys 2 cards, or it is a Hood that gives you 2 demons. Plus, you look at the misery. Like, I think this is a niche card, but I still think this card's got a lot of potential, which is why I'm saying buy this card. Don't open spotlights. If you have the tokens, get it. But at the same time, I want to say, like we say every single week, wait a few days and see what happens. See how the meta settles after the start of the new season. This comes out on Tuesday. The brand new season starts on Tuesday. We don't know what the meta is going to look like. So keep that in mind. I can be totally wrong about this card. This could be the biggest bust ever, or it could be an incredible card. This, of course, is just looking at the facts on paper and not having any testing yet. So just keep that in mind prospectively, and then spend the resources the way you want to spend your resources. At the end of the day, what is the most important is the way you want to play the game, the decks that you want to play. And resources are very limited. Card acquisition is not the best. So just keep that in mind going forward. Good cards do get nerfed, and bad cards do get buffed. So this card could get nerfed. This card could get buffed. Who knows? It's kind of just wishy-washy. We never know what's going to happen with an OTA. We never know what's going to happen with a patch. So at the end of the day, just do what you want to do. I do think this card is a buy, but it is wavering on the bust line as well. It's just slightly above it. But I do want to say thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for all of the support recently. I really do appreciate it. If you guys did stick around to the very end of the video, let me know down below what is your favorite one drop in the game. I will be replying to your comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, God bless. It's been real, and Tucker out.